Hello and welcome to a special edition of Western Perspective. I'm Nelson Liu. Well, Australia's media landscape has faced further blows, with public broadcaster the ABC hit with another wave of saving measures while trying to satisfy an increasingly diverse audience. With the corporation challenged by escalating political and ideological attacks due to social changes, we ask whether the ABC is still relevant to young people, what the areas of improvement are, and is its 5-year plan justified. In an exclusive discussion, I was joined by One Nation WA leader Colin Tincknell and Tiffany Venning from the MEAA WA. Colin Tincknell, Tiffany Venning, thanks for joining us on Western Perspective.
It's a pleasure.
Glad to be here.
So when we look at the ABC in 2020, is it still relevant today as a public broadcaster compared to decades ago?
Well, I think absolutely yes. And we only need to look at just the latest polling that's come out over the bushfire crisis. People are saying that without the emergency service that the ABC provides on the radio, they would quite possibly be dead. They're more relevant than ever, particularly in those sort of aspects. Definitely.
Yeah, look, I think whether every program or every part of the ABC is exactly the way that people would want it is debatable. But yeah, we need the ABC, and I'd like to see the ABC reflect all of Australians. I believe they've focused in a bit too narrow.
This week we discovered that the ABC is bringing in cuts to its budget. But what has been the exact problem with the organisation?
I suppose the cuts, if we look at the cuts, it is an issue. It's always going to be an issue. But if you look at Sky, if you look at Channel 9, if you look at Channel 7, the West Australian, if you look at media right across, everyone's struggling. So media are taking cuts in every way, radio, TV, press. So they need to do the same. The ABC is massive. I don't think people realise how big the ABC, and it's grown these tentacles over many years with the SBS and all the country radios and the online. It is massive. So yeah, we're in COVID-19. People are doing it tough. The ABC needs to, pull in their belt as well.
Tiffany, do you have anything to add to it?
Well, I would add to that particularly in the regional centres where we have, today, for example, almost 300 News Corp journalists in the eastern states from regional and community papers will be having today's their last working day. So these commercial publishers and broadcasters are moving out of the regions where it's more important for the ABC to have that presence, to be able to cover those stories effectively. Some of these are stories that might be regional but become national importance. So we absolutely, particularly in the regions, is more important than ever.
More than $1 billion of taxpayer funds is going into operations and content at the ABC. Other cuts to staff, including high-profile staff, news programs announced this week need to be cut to the extent that they are. Is it justified just to save the $40 million over the 5 years that they have?
I would argue no, it's not justified. And again, we come back to, we talk, as you've touched on, the children's content, the drama that they commission and things like that, those also get affected. So if we look at, there's a lovely little show punching well above its weight on the ABC on a Thursday night that was The Heights, which was shot here in Perth. Matchbox produced it, but the ABC have commissioned it. Now that's created, I can't tell you how many jobs for industry people here in this town alone, and kept them employed, particularly when screen sector in particular in WA has always been sort of up and down. That's been sold to the BBC. So, there's more money generated through that, and it extends our stories across the world. Now, if you sort of start reining in some of those things, Mystery Road, it's multi-award winning, highly commended programming, again, shot here in WA, and again providing, and it's not jobs, and it's supporting the economy, not just through the workers there, but obviously the towns that they're in, and tourism, it all feeds into this. So, it's not just about a newsreader who may or may not be on what could be considered, quite a high salary. Their remit, and I guess it is very broad, but it allows us to have our stories told. We wouldn't have it otherwise.
Nelson, can I make one quick comment on that? I'll be quick.
Sure.
When you look at ABC in Sydney and maybe Melbourne, Felicity touched on the high prices that or the high wages that some of the people earn. We're not talking 100 or 200,000. We're talking $750,000 sort of wages. I mean, some of these people are on incredible costs. I don't know whether as a national broadcaster they can afford that for a talent. Because I look at the ABC in the regional areas and I see they are going without. And the young journalists there who do a fantastic job, I deal with them on a regular basis, being a regional member, do a brilliant job and they've got very little to deal with. They are basically the same as the commercial stations and the commercial newspapers. They've got very little to work with. Often when an ABC journalist goes out, there'll be a special person for the camera, there'll be a journalist, there'll even be a technical person travelling with them. You see a commercial person do that, the one guy's doing the whole lot. He's doing those three jobs at the same time. So the ABC's generally done very well metro, but have been, most of the cuts have affected the regional ABC a great deal.
So with the changes this week, is there a problem with the ABC's business model? How much change is needed for it to become, or to continue becoming Australia's broadcaster?
Good question. Business models always need to be updated. Otherwise you become, one day you're here and doing really well, the next day you're gone.
That's a suggestion that the ABC's is outdated.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not in the board, so I don't know their business model down pat, but I'd imagine they need to keep it updated. Every business does. Every business needs to reinvent itself. ABC needs to continue to do that. The best way to do that is reflect all Australians, not a narrow view.
I'm just going to pick you up on that because I haven't sort of jumped in at this point, but there's been multiple inquiries, hearings and things into the perceived bias of the ABC, and each and every time it's come back as that's not the case.
Yeah, inquiries are inquiries.
Yeah.
And I've sat on millions of inquiries, and they are politically slant as well. The inquiries are. So I just think it's pretty easy to say we need stories that reflect the left side of politics, the right side of politics, the area that most Australians live in is the middle. Australians are generally pretty moderate people. I think the last election showed that. We had Shorten coming out with a highly left-wing program. We've had right-wing parties try and take us way to the right, and we saw that Australians decided to pick a government that was sort of more in the middle. And that's where I think they sit. I think that's where the majority of Australians sit.
Can it continue trying to uphold its charter the way that it is? Colin?
I think they can, but I think they do need to broaden their audience. You know, the ABC is... I've been living in this country for 65 years, and I was brought up on the ABC. You know, you're brought up on the child's and kids shows, through the educational programs. If you live in the country, you're about the only network that really looks after the country and does many programs on it. Then they got into comedy and they started making Australian movies, and they've been a leader in so many ways. I think now, I think politics has taken over the ABC, and I think that's a real shame. Because if they do go just one way, left or right, or whichever way they choose, and at the moment it looks like, from a person from my side of politics, it looks like they're on the left too much. I think they're just cutting down their audience. They're going to be unsuccessful, and they'll remain to have a lot of detractors if they really narrow their audience. They need to reflect all of Australia and all Australians, and I think that's the main thing. I think in the early days they did that well, and I think they've become too narrow over the last probably 15, 20 years.
And finally, given that this 5-year savings plan will be completed in the not-so-distant future, in both your opinions, how well do you think the ABC will be faring?
Look, I think that's a question you could ask of any media company, quite frankly, right now. A lot of them wouldn't be able to tell you how they're going to be in 2 years' time, never mind 5, let's be quite frank about it.
Never mind coronavirus?
Put coronavirus aside, I mean, that is certainly sped up and highlighted some of the fundamental issues, but they were always there. It's just COVID's just brought it to the forefront, and it's an immediate now. If media companies in general are in a crisis, which is why the ACCC have got this Google and Facebook please pay for content as some small measure of trying to stem that flood of just falling off the cliff. Whether that has an immediate or long-term impact even remains to be seen. I mean, Facebook sort of really don't want to play that game at all. But ultimately, the Facebooks and Googles of this world, they are they're producers of content. It's just they're using other people's content. There needs to be a mechanism in place. The ACCC has also recommended that regional funding for regional papers in particular needs to be at $50 million a year and able to, in order to keep a vibrant, viable industry in those spaces.
I think Tiffany's touched on the most important thing. If Google, Facebook do not add and don't pay for the news content they have, then there is no future for any of the medias as they currently are. Their business model will not work. Only today in the newspaper, Google have agreed to pay for content. I'd like to see what the details of that are. What are they going to pay, 1 cent for every 1,000 stories? I don't know. But look, the governments of the world need to team together on this because they won't have a media. When you don't have a free media, when you don't have a free press, you don't have a democracy. It's a real slippery slope. We need the press to be asking the tough questions of all sides of politics, and we need that reflects a real free society. And with Google and Facebook not paying for their content, that'll wipe out every single media, including the ABC.
I guess that's where the ABC comes in with its role as a public broadcaster. Tiffany, Venning, Colin, Tincknell, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
And now, MEAA WA President Dr. Andrew Miller has the latest update and comments on the COVID-19 situation.
Hi, it's nice to join you for a quick update on the week in COVID. Managed to get out for dinner last night, felt pretty safe in Western Australia given the numbers that we have. Where I was, people were still being pretty reasonable with their social distancing in the context of our belief that there is no community spread, as opposed to other states. And of course, this is what's bringing us into a bit of conflict. Western Australia has accidentally really achieved elimination of community spread. And so we find ourselves in a very lucky position compared to places like New South Wales and Victoria, where clearly they have a big problem trying to get things under control. Because of the nature of the numbers, every person having, maybe up to 100 contacts in the infectious period, and then you've got 100 people, then very soon you've got 10,000 to try and track down and test. Good news in the respect that they can now use a saliva test from the Doherty Institute, not as accurate as the previous swabs apparently, but more likely that you'll get people to cooperate, so there's a bit of a trade-off in that way. But we wish them all very well over East. I think West Australians agree at the moment pretty much universally that keeping the border closed for now until we see what direction that's going in is the smartest thing to do, and we certainly back the government in that respect. We do need to think about the people who are really suffering here over the border closure. And there's two large categories. There's the tourism businesses, and they need to be looked after in some way through government support. But all the other businesses in the community, of course, are very much welcoming the fact that we can open up while the border's closed. And then there are those who are separated from family and loved ones as a result, and we do need to figure out better ways of organising compassionate travel for those people, perhaps involving intensive testing in order that families can be reunited, because that's going to be important, particularly where there's young children involved around childcare and shared childcare and development for those kids and being able to be exposed, particularly where parents are separated. We are coming into winter. This is a respiratory virus. They do tend to do better in winter, so we can't take our eye off the ball. We do have a lot of people coming in, even though the borders are closed. and we can see how easily it is to go to security guards in a hotel and then spread to the community that way. We also had the meeting at the AMA this week, and you're stuck with me for another year. I'm really pleased to be continuing in the role for 12 months. I'll do my best to be open, to be honest, to be respectful, to be accurate. Where I make a mistake, I'll let people know, and I really welcome the feedback of everyone in the community as to how you are feeling about the way we are as a community travelling with COVID. The health aspects, of course, are incredibly important, because if we fix that, as we're demonstrating to the rest of the world in WA, then you can get on and fix the economy, all of the mental health stress and everything else. It's been great to see the fear evaporate from the community in WA, and sad to see it returning, particularly to Melbourne at the moment, and our thoughts are with them, hoping they can get it under control. If we can't be united as a country, at least our tax dollars will support the rest of the country as we collect more GST and keep the economy moving along. So stay safe, stay well. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Dr. Andrew Miller there. And that's Western Perspective for this week. We'll be back at the same time next week. But until then, Ivan and Taylor, it's back to you.
Thank you, Nelson. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website and social media pages.
No matter where you're watching, take care and have a pleasant evening.
Good night.